a MOME-n Egyetemen, a Holcim és a MOME közös rendezvényén. Szeretettel köszöntöm a vendégeinket, köszöntöm Mártérén asszonyt, aki a Holcim kommunikációs igazgatója, és természetesen köszöntöm a két művész urat, Fritz Brunier és Hieplert. Köszönöm, hogy elfogadták a meghívásunkat. A mai bemutató előadásnak az apropója az, hogy egy eléggé szokatlan és egyedülálló esemény, hogy egy hatalmas cég, a Holcim a 100 éves fennállásának megünneplése miatt megbízott 3 fotográfust, hogy erre a születésnapra készítsenek egy elgondolkodtató és maga nemében egyedülálló művészeti albumot. Engem, amikor ez a felkérés megtalált, hogy esetleg befogadjuk ezt a rendezvényt, nagyon elgondolkodtatott ez a koncepció, ez a filozófia, ami ebben az esetben létrejött egy megbízó, ebben az esetben a Holcim és a fotográfusok között. Engem különösen is érdekelnek ezek a helyzetek, és remélem, hogy a mai bemutatón ebben egy kicsit betekinthetünk, hogy hogyan is működik az a filozófia, ami teljesen látszólag különálló perifériákat egy ilyen albumban össze tud hozni. Szeretném megkérni Irént, hogy néhány szóban mutassa be a céget, és hogyha erről a koncepcióról megosztaná az elképzeléseit, élményeit, akkor ezt megköszönjük.
Nagyon sok szeretettel köszöntöm Önöket, és be kell valljam, hogy egy picit meghatódott vagyok a mai napon, mert egy hosszú előkészítő munka előzte meg azt, hogy Hiepler-Brunier alkotópárost ma Magyarországon üdvözölhessük. Sietnünk kellett, hiszen a könyvet szerettük volna minél hamarabb bemutatni, és sietnünk kellett, hiszen az egyetemi tanulmányidőszaknak vége, vizsgaidőszak kezdődik, hogyan oldjuk meg, hogy mégis Magyarországon első kézből megismerhessék azt, hogy hogyan készült ez a fotóalbum. Én először ebben az ötlettel több mint másfél évvel ezelőtt találkoztam, ahol ugye folyt az ötletelés, hogy hogyan lehetne 100 éves évfordulót úgy megünnepelni, hogy valóban azt mutassuk meg a világnak, amire büszkék vagyunk. Ahol szerintem 2 dologra büszke igazán. Egyrészt a munkatársaira. Az elmúlt 100 év sikerét a munkatársainak köszönheti. De hogyan lehet megmutatni kétkezi munkásokat a világnak? Hogyan lehet ezt úgy megmutatni, hogy érdekes legyen, hogy az látszódjon mögötte, ami valóban van, a mindennapi nehéz kétkezi munka, ami sokszor bizony nem szép, nem fölemelő. Aztán hogyan lehet megmutatni a másik büszkeségünket, a gyárainkat, az üzemeinket, amelyek látszólag, ahogyan a jelenlevő fotóművészek elmondtak, látszólag egyformák a világ minden részén, de ha közelebb lépünk, mégis látszódik, hogy mi a különbség egyes országokban. És ekkor vetődött fel a gondolat, hogy kérjünk fel erre olyan embereket, akik a legjobban meg tudják mutatni művészeket. A portréképek elkészítésére Marco Grobot kérték fel, ő egy svájci születésű, ma New Yorkban élő, és egy rendkívül elismert és nagyon felkapott divatos fotós. Azzal szoktunk viccelődni, ugye, hogy amerikai elnökök, híres színésznők, színészek és énekesek után most ugye a Holcimnek a munkatársait fotóztam. De ez nem vicc, ez valóban így történt, és azt kell mondanom, hogy azoknak az embereknek, akik a kamerája elé álltak, ez egy hihetetlen elismerés volt, hogy most ők lehetnek az ünnepeltek, és a cég általuk ünnepel. A másik ugye a gyárakat, üzemeket, épületeket sokkal nehezebb szerintem fotózni, és itt ugye jött a kapcsolat, hogy a német alkotópárost felkérni, és egy nagyon-nagyon izgalmas, egy évig tartó alkotómunka kezdődött meg ezzel. Amikor láttam az első képeket, akkor megdöbbentem. Tehát tényleg annyira őszinték, annyira nyersek, annyira költőiek és annyira művésziek, hogy nagyon mélyen a szívemben ragadott, és akkor arra gondoltam, hogy muszáj lenne elhozni őket Magyarországra. Marco Grob egyébként fotózott, tehát a munkatársamat Magyarországi Holcimást is megfotózott, de Hiepler-Brunier páros nem jött Magyarországra, nem jöhetett, hiszen ők 13 másik országban jártak, és akkor elkezdtem kezdeni hozzájuk az utat, hogy hogyan is lehetne. És a partner hogy mely lenne az az intézmény, ahol ennek a legnagyobb haszna van, ahol talán a legérdekesebb lenne a szakmai hátterét megismerni. És most szeretném nagyon megköszönni a Holina Egyetemnek, a Művészeti Egyetemnek, és különösen önnek, hogy ilyen lelkesen és ilyen segítőkészen mögé állt ennek a hihetetlen gyorsan néhány hét alatt megszervezett rendezvénynek. Örülök, hogy eljöttek, és szeretném átadni a szót azoknak, akiért ma itt vagyunk.
Még egy fontos bejelenteni való lenne, külön kérés, hogy a hallgatók az előadások végén természetesen a dedikálásukra el fogják látni az albumokat, amit kaptak, úgyhogy szerintem ez egy nagyon izgalmas alkalom arra, hogy a saját kézzel ellátott saját albumot legyenek.
So, good afternoon. We are Hiepler, Brunier. I think somebody said that before. This is David Hiepler. I'm Fritz Brunier. We're here from Berlin to present our latest project, Industrious. We did for the 100th centennial of Holcim. That was a book, and now actually at the moment an exhibition at the Kunstmuseum in Bern in Switzerland. Yeah, first I think we'll start with a short introduction of us. We'll show some pictures of the work besides the project. The first one is done at the Dead Sea in Israel, and a couple of other pictures will come.
But let me take over. Maybe it's interesting for you to know we started our career. So I grew up in Germany and we moved to Switzerland. No, I was born in Germany. I grew up in Switzerland. He was born and grew up in the south of Germany, and we met actually in Berlin in 1992 when we went to the photography school in Berlin. It's called Letteverein. And there was a break after school. There was a break for about 3 years, and then we met again, and we started our career. We just decided, okay, now we're going to start with photography, because maybe some of you know it's not very easy to earn money with photography, and it takes a hard decision to say this is what we want to do, and that's what we want to earn our money from. So 1997 we started. Luckily we won a prize for photography, and then one thing came to the other. We started in Berlin with architectural photography. We were just thinking about how can we make money, and they built a lot of buildings in Berlin, and so we were thinking, let's make a portfolio, architecture portfolio, and we did that, but this was not very successful with architects, but we tried to also make publicity for ourselves in advertising agencies, and that worked out pretty good, and so for a long period we did a lot of advertising photography. Somehow, in some cases, this was not very satisfying to work for advertising, and we decided to move to more editorial stuff, and we tried to do the architectural style again with architects, and with a second chance it worked out with the architects and also with editorial stuff. Yeah, and in the end we landed with this project, Industrious. But maybe first we show some images. Yeah. This is absolutely free work. It's not commissioned work. We did this work during some years, and we just published this book with some of these works. Yeah.
This again is the Dead Sea, Israel. It was a short trip around the Dead Sea and the desert there, and we found this very strange kibbutz called En Gedi, what is kind of a very weird location. the sea was the sea's drowned. No, it's not drowning. It's drying. I don't know exactly. The water is leaving, and now the umbrellas are there somewhere in the desert, and no water is near to them. This is the beach of Nice in France, south of France.
So this one is out of a project. It's called Places of the World, and it's a game with this title, Places of the World, because everybody who hears this title, Places of the World, expects something very great, very special, and we change it to something what's present everywhere. It can be everywhere. So this can be in France, it can be in the United States, it can be everywhere. And so we just played with this title, Places of the World, but we took images of places, they're not special.
That is some sandpatters on a beach in Scotland. Okay. That was in Iceland in the winter. A beach too. Iceland again.
Yeah, this is also a series. It's called The Waiting, and it's all about waiting people. In this book, we have a text about this. A philosopher from Switzerland wrote this text. It's a nice text, and it's about waiting. What is waiting? And these waiting people, they are sort of lost in this countryside where they are. This is a series, it's called Blind Houses. We found this by occasion in Iceland. The first house, they have no windows at all. They're just storage halls or something like this. They don't need windows, but they're built like we are familiar with that houses because usually in Germany people live in that kind of houses, and when you build a storage place, it looks totally different than a house for living. And so we took the first one, and then it appeared that more and more of these houses appeared in the countryside, and we took four images.
Okay. This is it in Ecuador, on the Babayu River, which is close to Guayaquil, the biggest city there. It was kind of a construction site for a bridge. This is France, in Paris, the Bibliothèque Nationale François Mitterrand, I think is the right name, I'm not sure.
Yeah. This is actually a commissioned work. It was for an architectural series for a travel magazine in Germany.
There was a night in Houston in Texas. We were there for an architect and did shot a project for them, and in the time where we weren't shooting for him, we did some personal work in the city. That was a series we did for the tourist board of Austria. It was in Vorarlberg, which is a small part of Austria, and it was about contemporary architecture there. This one too. That again is a thing in Iceland. It's a geothermal power plant. This is from a series called Empty Rooms. This is a storage facility in the Albertinum in Dresden, what is a very old and very famous museum, I think. After the renovation and before all the paintings were coming back. This again is from Empty Rooms. This is an apartment in Berlin, done by David Chipperfield. And this also is a project of David Chipperfield Architects in Vienna. So it's commissioned work then. This one too.
It's from the series Empty Rooms again. Okay, and this takes over to the industrial photography. And if you can see, we don't direct images, so we're not photographers that creating our own worlds, non-existing worlds. We're taking images of existing worlds and existing places, and we don't use artificial light. We only use available light. And yeah, sometimes we try to find the straight lines in the world. You see it in the graphic composing. Sometimes we try to find something disturbing, maybe like this image is romantic. It's an absolutely romantic light and situation, but it's industry, and usually we don't expect to see industry in this romantic way, but maybe it's changing meanwhile, that a lot of plants, they want to see themselves in a romantic way. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay,
and
so
maybe, I don't know, maybe in between we can tell something about the cameras before we get it over to Industrious. Usually we work with this camera. It's a shift camera. This camera is in a way made for us, or in a way especially made for us. There are some manufacturers in the world, they produce that sort of cameras. One, maybe the most popular, is Alpa in Switzerland. And, but the problem with, we started with 4x5 inch analog photography, and we wanted to change to digital photography, and everything needed to be more compact and more stable. And the problem was in this time when we wanted to change, there was no camera with some features. These are the special features, you don't find it with other manufacturer, and this is a very small manufacturer in Berlin. It's some crazy guy who just wanted to make cameras, I don't know. So this one is maybe the most, also for the Industrious project, the most important thing, because you close the sensor. You don't find this anywhere else, because when you change the lens in this Industrious place, you have a lot of dust, and the dust gets on the sensor, and then you have to do a lot of retouching later on, and you have to clean the sensor all the time. And the other feature we had, but we just changed it. We used to have this matte screen. We used to have this matte screen here, so we could change from the matte screen to the digital back, because we were used to construct the images on the matte screen. And we couldn't imagine, when we changed to digital photography, we couldn't imagine how it works without this matte screen. But then, with working with digital backs, we realized we don't need it, and so we just dropped it, and we don't need it anymore. Meanwhile, this is the latest phase 1 digital back. Meanwhile, we have a live preview on this, so we don't need this matte screen anyway. Just with air blower, and sometimes with special liquids. Yeah, very carefully. And so we can we also can stitch images together. If we don't have enough wide angle, we can stitch it together, two or three images. And you don't find it in other cameras, is we can turn the back from landscape to portrait. And that makes working much easier than turning the whole camera around. I don't know why Alpa doesn't do it. I have no idea. And special, so we can shift here the lens, and we can turn it around, so we can shift in every direction we want. We can shift downwards, we can shift on the side, half on the side, half on top. And that's the only guy who does this. But we need a tripod to use this camera, and a lot of this architecture, all the images from Industrials were made with this camera. We need a tripod, we need it anyway for the most situations here, and we need it for architectural photography also. But the other images you saw, with, for example, the weighting, we can't build up a tripod and we can't build up a camera, so we did the other work mostly with Canon EOS 1. But this was a little bit disturbing because we have 80 megapixel here, and on the other hand 20 megapixel on the Canon, and sometimes it's very hard to combine those images because of this different resolutions. And so we asked this guy to make a small hand camera, and he said, okay, no problem.
It took him 4 months, but he did it then.
He's not very quick, but so we can just change the digital back. We can turn the back also, like on the other camera, we can just turn it around like we want. It's handy, and as a viewfinder we use the iPhone. That was actually an Alpa idea. It's not our idea, and it's not his idea. Alpa was the first one that made it. And we can also shift the camera, but only in one way. So if we want to shift on the side way, we have to turn the camera around. Yeah, and now this is our hand camera, and we just move around to make a shot with this camera. Yeah, that's it, mostly with the cameras. Any questions?
Perhaps.
No.
Okay, nothing. So now we're starting with our project Industrials we did. That was kind of a very nice project for us because we were able to travel around the world, actually. And we went to 13 countries in 16 different places, on very strange places once in a while. Almost every continent. We weren't in Africa because Marco Gropp was there, and there was not too much to do, I guess. And yeah, we'll show you some pictures we did. That was in India, actually. It is a view from the old plant to the new one. A very beautiful shot, I think.
But a problem shot, by the way.
Yeah.
Working?
Yeah, Holcim wasn't very lucky to have that one in the exhibition because you can see a lot of dust then. But it was beautiful anyway.
Yeah, and it's sort of, it looks a little bit apocalyptic, and there was this idea, in Holcim, they wanted to make an art project, but when we were doing this, they realized, okay, I don't know how to say it in English, they lost the guts, or and
they realized that it's a big difference between having somebody there who does personal work or art piece, and somebody who is commissioned to do the usual way of doing corporate photography. You would never do that for advertising campaign for Holcim because it is a bit crappy. The old plant in the foreground is about to be turned down, and you can see a lot of things that nobody really wants to talk about it.
And maybe what's interesting for you is how they started this project. So Holcim became 100 years old this year, and they saw a bank presentation a couple of years ago. Bank presentation. They got 100 years old, and they were presenting a book. And Holcim said, "We want also to have a book, but we want to have it much better than this bank book." And so they came, they organized the same guy who did this bank book to do this industrious book. And this art director, he just chose 2 photographers, Marco Grob and us, with a carte blanche, as we call it. Maybe, I don't know if it says something to you, carte blanche, it's, we can do whatever we want. So there's no restriction, and they just go there. It's the plant is open for you. Go and play. And actually this never happened before in the commissioned work, that somebody says to us, you can do whatever you want. And that made it interesting. Yeah, and that's the reason why we're not orientating in a corporate way. We just did our work, what we wanted to do. That's the result.
This was done in China. This is the Yangtze River, where the cement is shipped, or the limestone is coming in to the plant. That again is India. Close to in the background you can see the plant, and in the foreground there's a farmer on his field. He's actually a worker at the plant too, so he does both. What was kind of a funny incident.
And it was in India, the plant manager, he's the better photographer than we are, because he always asked us, sorry, why black and white? I don't understand it. The word is colorful. I just don't understand why you're taking black and white. And why don't you use filters? And why don't you take the images in the evening time when the light is gloomy and like these romantic images we showed before? And we just tried to tell him, listen, we have our handwriting in photography, and we're not interested in corporate stuff or romantic stuff. We just want to do these images. And in the end, he said, I took a lot of much better pictures than you did.
Probably he was right. We never saw that one. I don't know. And again, this is China, a different location. A very strange place in a way, because the plant is right in the middle of the town. You can see, or on the edge of the town, where housing was very close to the cement plant, but it was kind of amazing.
And interesting in China, when we talk about China and India, is as Schwellenland, as a country at the border to the first world, is that they're completely different. China, and they're very organized in China, extremely organized. In India, they're not organized at all. So you can compare China to India. It's totally different.
This is the United States of America, and close to St. Louis. This plant is called Saint-Geneviève in Missouri. This thing was brand new. It was, I think, a year old or something like that. And we'll see some more pictures from that plant, because it was very beautiful, because it was completely done of shiny metal thing. It was like a photographer's dream.
And this is one of maybe the only images where we took out some things or something. Were hundreds of, what was it, eagles or?
No, it was, I don't know the word actually.
Big birds.
Birds.
Big birds. They were just turning around the preheating tower. And in the end, at the first sight, we were thinking, that's nice. But in the end, we figured out it's a sort of, it symbolizes United States with this eagle stuff in the air.
It was too much cliché then. And
too much cliché and too narrative, and so we just get rid of this. We usually don't do it, but sometimes if we think it really makes sense in a way of telling a story or not telling a story, we change it, but only a few times.
This is Mexico, on the north of Mexico, close to Hermosillo. Yeah.
And
just a view from the Peking Tower.
Yeah, and special in what we figured out is special in the different countries, because you think when you when we were commissioned, we were thinking about, okay, we're going to travel to 13 different places in the world, and we're taking always cement plants. Can this be interesting? Or does it repeat, just repeat? And you don't see the difference between the countries, but actually there is a big difference between the countries. So when I think of Mexico, it's except of what you see below on the images, but the rest is what I think of. There are horse riders, in the prairie, gauchos, and so it's also a bit of a cliche, but in that case, I like it.
And again, India, one of the few shots with people on it, but it was, this plant was...
Sorry about this.
Who is it then? Okay. This plant was kind of very special because it was the only one with a lot of people working there. Usually they run the plants with, I don't know, not too many people. But in Wadi, in India, there were lots of people doing doing maintenance. Yeah. So this was kind of special. And if you see the woman in the middle there, just that one, if the resolution would be a bit better, you could see that she's wearing a sari and safety shoes and goggles and a helmet with a little ring on top, so she can carry with the safety helmet things on top of her head. And these little details were very catchy in that picture.
So this is in the exhibition in Bern, this is the entrance image when you get up the stairs, and you're in a sort of representative room. This image is 340 by 280 meters.
That is Brazil. That was
Quarry.
A quarry. Not very far from Rio de Janeiro. Probably the most beautiful place we've been to. It was situated between these green hills you can see on the left of the picture. And again, Mexico. That was in Indonesia. It looks a bit like a camp for prisoners, like a prisoners camp. And funnily, next to that plant is an island where 3 high security prisons are situated, so probably.
So and that was the reason why we changed. Not the jail was the reason why we took this, but it was just we were standing there, and it just reminded us of things we already saw in movies or something like this, with this prison thing, and we were free to do what we wanted, and that's what we did.
And again, China. I think this was one of the biggest plants we've been to. They got 2 preheating towers and 2 kilns. Thank you. And it looked very symmetric then. We thought that could be very Chinese, probably very
Socialist.
socialism.
Yeah, that was this idea what occurred when the Chinese, they make their, what is it called, parade, with the military parade on this straight prospect, and sort of that just fitted on that idea.
This again is Indonesia. As you can see, obviously it rains a lot in Indonesia because everything has a roof.
And it reminded us of these houses in the background. When we looked over to this silo, it just looked like that the same houses in the background are built up on this silo, and we could imagine people living there.
Little village on top of that tower. There's now Switzerland, a very old plant, but very modern, by the way. This is, I think, the oldest part of the plant then. On the right side, you can see the kiln, this big tube there, rotating.
But I'm quite sure nobody knows, or only a few people here in the room, maybe you know how cement is made of. And that was special with this contract, that we didn't need to show the way how is cement made. And I'm still very happy that we didn't have to show it.
This is an excavator in Germany, in the quarry, by night. And this again is in the US, the Saint-Geneviève plant. And it was like a rocket shooting facility, I don't know. Again, Saint-Geneviève. Obviously, they have a lot of energy there because this thing was lit the whole night through, for whatever reason. And again, Saint-Geneviève. This is a storage hall for the clinker, for the result of the process.
No, sorry, it's limestone.
It's limestone, okay. Yeah. It's stone anyway. In Germany. This is in Germany? Germany.
Yeah, what was interesting is the most dusty places all over the world were in Germany. Everybody expects Germany is clean and like Switzerland, but actually it was the most dirty place inside of the facility was Germany. But we love it because it makes structures like snow over the years. And we also, maybe there's another one from Switzerland. This is inside, and in Switzerland we found the structures also outside of the building. And it really looks, from far away, it really looks like snow. And when you come closer, it's hard, it's cement, and with wind and weather and rain, it just changed to some very interesting patterns. Legerdorf, yeah.
Yeah, this was in the Czech Republic, beneath the mills, I think, in some strange. I actually don't know what it is.
Yeah, it was just a place in the Czech Republic. Sinister. It was a sinister place in the Czech Republic. And the whole place was a sort of sinister, and we tried to show this in these images, that what is it? You never know what's coming around the corner. This is in Switzerland what I told with these structures, with these dust structures, but with this resolution, unfortunately, you can't see it in the book. You will see it. And of course, in the museum, in the exhibition, you can see it very good.
This again was in the Czech Republic. Just a kind of a nice detail, covered in dust again. We learned a lot of dust on this journey. This is also a very strange place. That is a tunnel in Scotland, where the quarry we visited was situated on top of the highlands, on I think 400 or 500 meters over the sea level. And this is, there's a big hole, and they dump all the stone into it, and it falls down, and it lands on this conveyor belt. And then I think the tunnel is about 3 kilometers long, and it comes to the seaside where the mills are situated.
You can drive with the Jeep inside of this tunnel. That's a weird place. And we imagined also a guy who lives there and he never gets out. He needs to be there all the time, 24. Maybe he was born there, down there.
And he's there for the switch then, just. Okay, I'm sorry, that was my mistake. The quarry in Germany.
Very surprising because white. I haven't seen it before. And it's like a desert, a white desert, and there's a desert in the United States called white sands, and I didn't know something similar is existing in Germany.
That was, I think, the coldest part of the journey. We went to Moscow in January. Or not really Moscow, but close to it. That was situated near a town called Kolomna. And this is just sort of grain in the snow. We had, I think, the lowest temperature we reached were minus 23 degrees or something. Indonesia again, from the preheating tower. That was a construction site of a bridge in Ecuador. It was a Chinese company building a big bridge with Swiss cement in Ecuador, what was kind of a very exotic place to be.
Everything was, if you have ever seen a construction site like this in wherever, Germany, United States, or in Hungary, you can't imagine how this construction site was made of. Everything was put together from sort of
crap,
nothing.
It's amazing that works out. And again, the bridge. That is a concrete plant, the only one we visited. Oh, the only one we actually did pictures of. In Ecuador too. Very freshly renovated. The same site by night. This was the preheating tower in the Czech Republic.
And it's completely different, like all the others we saw all over the world. And we think it's made by Skoda.
We were not sure. And this again is Russia. And because it's so cold, they got to cover all the plant because they would lose too much energy. So this thing looked a lot of different to the other things too. And this is India, once more. And Russia. Kind of a new, building a new part of the plant. I don't know exactly what it is. That again is in the United States, Saint-Geneviève again. 2. Okay.
So that's where we started. So at the beginning of this project, at the beginning of this book, there was this idea, or the art director had this idea of the visual language. It was the portraits, he was thinking about Richard Avedon, and with the industrial photography, he was thinking about Bernd and Hilla Becher. And of course, we are and we don't copy anybody. And at the beginning, it was planned to make a book. Because it's a centennial book, 100 years, it's split in 10 decades, and at the beginning we were commissioned to do only 10 shots in 10 different countries for every decade as an opener of the chapter, to have one shot. And so during our work, he saw that we're definitely not Bernd and Hilla Becher, and our work is totally different to Bernd and Hilla Becher, and we really sometimes we try to avoid it, because sometimes it's not that easy to avoid to look like Bernd and Hilla Becher. But I think it worked out pretty well, and our influence into this book became bigger and bigger. And out of these 10 images, this planned 10 images, they became to 40. In the end, it were 42, 43 images. And with the diversity in the language, we have night shots and we have day shots. We have totally different situations, light situations. And we wanted to cope with every light situation. We didn't have a plan like Bernd and Hilla Becher. They need one weather situation, and they have one point of view where they take the images. And we really didn't want to do this. We wanted to cope with every weather situation, with every day situation, and anyway, with every situation we meet there. And I think in the end, in my opinion, it makes the work more interesting, that this reputation of always the same idea of the images. Actually, I like the work of Bernd and Hilla Becher very much, and it's outstanding as a piece. And unfortunately, this project ended. It ended good, but there was one problem, because we had this exhibition in Bern, in Switzerland, and it very quickly occurred that a lot of people in Switzerland examined or figured out a relationship between the private industry and the museum, what is financed by the government, or partly financed by the government. And so they were thinking, Holcim is making an advertising event in a museum, and they didn't want this to be happened. Or to happen, and so the discussion about this, is it allowed for the private industry to show or to use art for their own interests? That's a question. It can be discussed. Maybe it must be discussed. But the discussion got into a very strange way. There were other things that came on top on that. And so in the end, nobody was speaking about the images anymore. Everybody was speaking about the politics in the museum, and for us it was very unfortunate in the end, or a bit unfortunate in the end. But we have to say this politics, it didn't get out of Bern, so it just stayed there as a sort of a regional problem, or not a regional problem, but a regional discussion. and it stayed in Bern, and maybe it stayed in Switzerland, but it didn't get it over the borders to Germany. And so in the end, it was also publicity for this exhibition, and maybe a lot of people, they came to the exhibition to check out what is it all about, and are the images really good, or is it an advertising event of Holcim? But in my opinion, in the end, it's not it's definitely not a corporate and advertising event in the museum, because the director of the museum, he took this project because of the images and not because of the connections between Holcim and the museum or something like this.
And I think the exhibition was a big success, and we had about 16,000 visitors in 2 months, and so actually we are lucky and happy. So in the end, if you're interested, we could show some pictures from the making of.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a few pictures just to show how it was to work there. Making cement is kind of very heavy industry. What is the reason for some security things as our personal, what it was called, the personal security equipment. Mm-hmm. So we always had to wear the vests, the helmets, most of the time the masks and the goggles, safety shoes, and we had to be very careful on the sites. I was in Germany. Yeah, our assistant did that.
Look, maybe you figure out.
The size probably. This is just the other way around. I'm the bigger one. This is in Russia. It was almost romantic. I think this is in the Czech Republic. David, a bit weird. Mexico.
Yeah, and you see the camera, what I told, that we had this matte screen on the left side of the camera. Here, we just cut it.
There's Scotland. I think, yeah. And again, Scotland. Also a very nice situated quarry.
But in the first 2 days, we didn't see the quarry at all, because it's on, as Fritz told before, it's on 400 meters above sea level. And it was, as you expected in England, it was foggy for 2 days, and we were thinking about, is there a quarry or is there not a quarry? And we asked them, and maybe they just didn't make up the story that there's a quarry, but then after 2 days, it opened up and we saw it.
Again, Scotland. It's on the seaside, and if you come too close to the edge, then you had to wear these vests.
Close to the seaside means about 20 meters.
Just in case, you know.
Just in case you stumble and fall, and you crawl 20 meters, and then you fall into the water.
This is somewhere above Ecuador, where the boss of the plant organized a little crane. This is Indonesia, a cave we found close to the quarry. In Brazil. So now we can prove we were there. This is China. I think this is a part of a mill.
No,
this is maybe a kiln. I don't know exactly. Something round, I could tell.
And maybe
made of metal.
maybe interesting for you the way of working. So we arrive at a location, and we just start to scout the location, because we can't just start with the big camera, because it's not very quick to do images. So we have to get a
to collect
overview of the plant, and to collect impressions, and we do this with a normal DSL SLR camera. And in the evening we sit together and then we just filter all the images, or we go over the images and we decide what images we are going to do next day. Sometimes we do a big shot when the light situation is as we want it in this certain moment, but usually we do it later on. And in the end, on every site we did about maybe 1,500, 2,000 small impressions with the DSL camera, with the SLR camera, and then we chose 50, maybe 50, 60 images we did with the big one, and then we presented Holcim 10, and in the end we used in the book 2 or 3. So it's 2 images out of about 1,500. And if the decision is a right decision, you never know. Maybe you look over the material 2 years later and you would decide in a totally different way. And that's interesting. For us, it's interesting in working that the decision you make is always a representation for the moment and not, it doesn't present what do you say, it's right or it's wrong.
That was India. Some very nice guy we met on the street there. Well, we did the shot with a farmer on the field. And they were absolutely thankful for being photographed by us. I don't know why. But they were very nice.
Yeah, that's funny. In India, they want to be on the images. We stayed in Hyderabad and we went to was heißt Denkmal, sightseeing point, and we were the main attraction. So the people there, they really loved to make images with us on the image, and they didn't even ask. So they just took images, and that's when you're a photographer, it's very nice because it allows you to do the same with these people, and they don't care, they don't mind, they love it actually to be photographed by us.
Okay, so I think that's it. Anything?
No?
I think we're done then. Thank you very much.
Nagyon szépen köszönjük. Most lehetőség van, igen, egy pár kérdést föltenni. Szaladgálni fogok a mikrofonnal.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
I have 2 questions. One is technical, another one is artistic. I will start from a technical one because it's more easy, maybe. The technical one is that when you're taking pictures, you usually make just one exposure of every frame, or you work it through after.
No, if the light situation is a difficult light situation, for example, backlight, no, not backlight, when you've got the sun in front of the lens, then we do a fusion, image fusion. So
HDR, like a couple of
so you
shots,
make several exposures.
Several exposures, and put it together afterwards.
Okay. So the question is actually starting from this thought that from the photographers which are taking pictures of the similar, let's say, things, they have very recently turned to digital from film, and yeah, because of the film resolution and so on, this kind of things. And how do you probably also made this shift in your work at some point, and so how can you comment on this somehow? What you can do now on digital, what you cannot do comparing to film? Can you comment it somehow?
I think film has a kind of special charm in the best moments, but usually I think now the digital equipment is a kind of much better. You got more resolution I think now we have more resolution than an 8 by 10 inch thing. it is easier. It is not so heavy, so you can move quickly, or quicker than we could. We had, before changing to digital equipment, I think we were carrying about 40 kilos of equipment with us in the best case. And now it's about 15, so this is very much, we're getting older. It's better. It's easier to handle, and you don't have to be in the lab, and the possibilities of having influence of the on the image in the end is much bigger, and you're more free to do what you really want to.
So there is no disadvantages from your point of view. No, that's good. If not,
no,
not really. Maybe
not really.
Maybe there are some light situations where analog film material has a certain charm, as he said, and you can't copy this onto digital. It just reacts. The sensor reacts differently to the film, but it's only one certain light situation when you've got a sun or a strong light source in front of the lens. Then sometimes, only sometimes, analog material is in a way softer, or it handles it more charming. But on the other side, and another thing is maybe in enlargements, when you make very big enlargements, in the analog photography you have a grain, and the grain, it doesn't, of course we try to have a very small grain with 4 by 5 inch, so we're not grain fans. Opposite around, we don't like the grain actually, but when you blow it up, the grain is
makes it kind of look more organic. It's kind of not so technical.
Yeah.
And if you blow up a digital file, then it is not so easy to make the print look good. And in this project, we had 2 prints about 2 by 3 meters, and we had to put a kind of an artificial grain on the picture to make it still beautiful.
so in a way, you can say that you work in post-production more with the digital
than before.
image than before.
No, not really, because because there was this middle thing between digital photography and analog photography. So when we started to buy a scanner, an Imacon scanner, and then you scan this stuff, and you have to do a lot of retouching and manipulating, and until it looks like a C print, or it looks more like a C print. And in my opinion, it's more work to this halfway. But so you do it on film and then you digitalize it. It's more work than do it directly on digital material. And by the way, what I have to admit, I don't know who's in charge of these prints outside. We are not happy with these prints because there's something wrong with the resolution. You see the pixels, and that's not in our. That's not the idea.
It's okay. Okay, and I'll quickly ask my second question. It's more artistic. What was your reason to work in a couple? It's not very usual in this, I think, in this art editorial world to work for 2 people together. That was like from career point of view, that one can handle the stuff, another one is taking the shot, or.
No, it's
or or maybe you cannot be without each other, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we started working together at school, actually, and it went out very well. So we did kind of the exercises we got from school together, or I was in his darkroom or something, and we were always kind of collaborating. And after school, we did different things. I was thinking I will be a still lifer, what was completely wrong. And he was doing kind of musicians and portrait stuff. And after a while, we decided to do this architectural book to get jobs, just like for the money. And after a while, it fit too good to stop that. And it felt too good because I think as different as we are as a person, as good are we together as one photographer. We both do the shots, we both are taking the pictures. And that works out very, if you would send each of us with a camera in a room, then you can be sure that we come back with about 80% the same pictures. And now it's been 15 years, I think, and it still works out very well. So
Super.
I think that is the reason.
You just...
And it's easier. I think it's easier to do it as a couple if it fits, because you have always somebody you can rely on. Always, but someone is there you can ask. It's kind of sharing the Verantwortung.
Responsibility.
The responsibilities, yes. And if one's not in a good shape, then the other one can handle the things, and it's kind of more relaxed working.
Cool.
And then we sorted out some things, or we split some things in the
office.
In the office. So I'm more the technical nerd. I'm more in this post-production thing and camera techniques, and Fritz is more in communications. And I always hated to take the telephone to talk to somebody. So it's brilliant. He's going to do that part.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for questions. No more questions,
It's disappointing.
ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
Were you waiting for soft light, sfumato, or?
It depends.
What?
I think we use every time of the picture, every time of the day, if it fits. It's like a decision by, if you're on location, you can see what light would be the best at the moment. Or we try several different times of the day and see what is the best thing afterwards. So there's no kind of a special daytime for us to shoot. Not really.
How long did it take to take all the photos and travel around these 13 countries? Just about.
We were traveling about for a year. We did about 2 weeks traveling, then 2 weeks break, and that was, I think, one plant a month, and that was a year in general, like from June to June.
Thanks.
What was usually we worked 3 to 4 days in one plant. So the idea, of course, is you fly there and you go to the plant, you make your job, and then you go back. But when you travel around, and we were just thinking about, it's crazy just to come to Indonesia and you see a plant. So we just took 3 days off after the shooting and spent 3 days in Indonesia. Or we just spent 3 days in every country to see at least a little bit of the country.
Thank you. No more questions? No? So all questions I tried to ask have been answered. So thanks for this beautiful presentation. So thank you very much again for coming and gave this presentation.
Thank you.
I hope you are well.
Yeah, we're pretty
So-
well. And still well. And
Still standing. So there's only one part of this event. They have this dedication, and thank you for all.
You're welcome.
very
Thank you
much.
very much for listening, and thank you very much for the invitation.
So, thank
Okay.
you.
Great.
Yeah?